At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to a group of bikers known as the Outcast Gang. This gang has taken control of the city, causing trouble for the police. Besides reckless driving, they are also involved in illegal activities. The gang is led by Danny, also known as Albert, and is assisted by his son, Jojo. Dalton, a trusted member of the gang, often carries out heavy tasks. However, Albert doesn't realize that Dalton's real name is not Dalton. In reality, he is a DEA agent named Phil Broker, working undercover. On that night, Broker calls in a special forces team to arrest Albert and his men. The gang is shocked by the raid. The raid initially goes smoothly until Albert and Jojo attack the agents. A shootout occurs, and as the situation escalates, Albert decides to escape with Jojo, blowing up his factory to create a distraction. Luckily, Broker quickly pursues them on a motorcycle, cornering them. Broker then beats Danny and cuffs him. Soon after, more DEA agents arrive. They are forced to shoot Jojo as he resists arrest. Broker is deeply affected by Jojo's death since he was a good friend of his. From that moment, Broker decides to retire from the DEA. 2 years later, Broker lives in Inganjuk, keeping away from crowds and raising his daughter, Maddie. Maddie, a quiet girl who is often bullied by Teddy, the troublemaker at school, fights back by beating Teddy up. Meanwhile, Broker is fixing the stairs at his house with his friend Tito. Soon after, the school contacts him about the incident with Maddie. Worried about his daughter, Broker rushes to the school. At the school, Broker is met with anger from Cassie, Teddy's mother, but her husband quickly drags her away. The school counselor, Susan, explains that Cassie is often out of control, and to avoid further issues, the school is working with Sheriff Keith, who is responsible for the area. Susan invites Broker into her office to explain the situation. Maddie refuses to be blamed, as she was only defending herself. Broker agrees that Maddie is not at fault and explains that Maddie's mother passed away the previous year, which is why Maddie's emotions are unstable. The issue is resolved, and Broker is allowed to take Maddie home. However, as Broker leaves the school, he sees Cassie inciting her husband, Jimmy, who approaches Broker with the intent to fight. Broker ends up throwing him to the ground. Luckily, Sheriff Keith intervenes and separates them. Cassie becomes increasingly angry with Broker, also blaming Jimmy for being a coward. She decides to report Broker to her brother, Gator. Gator is a powerful drug dealer in the area, and anyone who interferes with his business will be brutally punished. After beating someone up, Gator heads back to his drug factory, where he is met by Cassie. She immediately asks for Gator's help to get revenge on Broker and demands free drugs. This explains why Cassie is always angry and uncontrollable. The next day, Broker takes Maddie to school and speaks privately with Susan. Broker asks Susan to support Maddie at school, as Maddie also needs a female figure to help her. Susan agrees and warns Broker to be cautious, as many people in the area are not good. After speaking with Susan, Broker decides to apologize to Jimmy at his workplace for Maddie's actions. Jimmy forgives him, and the issue is settled. Later, at a gas station, some thugs provoke Broker. He tries to stay calm but eventually loses control and fights them off. Despite being outnumbered, Broker isn't intimidated. Afterward, Broker asks one of the thugs who hired them, but they claim no one sent them, even though they were hired by Gator. Broker is then warned by Sheriff Keith to avoid causing trouble. That afternoon, Broker takes Maddie horseback riding and reflects on her mother. Maddie tells him to move on from his grief. Meanwhile, Gator secretly deflates Broker's car tires and sneaks into his house, where he discovers that Broker is a former DEA agent. At night, Maddie can't sleep because her cat and favorite doll are missing. It turns out that Gator took them before leaving the house. Broker reassures Maddie and promises to find them. On the other hand, Gator is going through Broker's files while eating Pak Kumis's cassava chips. After reviewing everything, he becomes more determined to destroy Broker's life. Meanwhile, Broker finds Maddie's doll outside the house, damaged. It seems to be another warning after the gas station incident. Gator then calls Cheryl, a fellow drug dealer with connections to the Outcast gang. The next day, Gator meets Cheryl at his factory. They immediately satisfy their desires there, and Gator shows Cheryl Broker's file. Meanwhile, Broker mistakenly believes that Jimmy took Maddie's cat. He confronts Jimmy at work, but Jimmy is confused. Gator's real goal in meeting Cheryl is to collaborate with Albert and his gang. He knows Albert wants revenge on Broker, so Gator convinces Cheryl to negotiate with Albert. If the collaboration works, their drug business could expand. Cheryl agrees with Gator's plan. That night, she meets Albert's lawyer, Works, and gives him Broker's file. Works then shows Albert the file in prison, fueling Albert's desire for revenge. Meanwhile, Broker plans a birthday party for Maddie with Susan's help, hoping to make her smile despite the loss of her mother. The next day, Broker takes Maddie to school, where he invites Teddy to the party. He also promises Cassie to buy clothes for Teddy as compensation for the earlier incident. After dropping Maddie off, Broker goes back to his carpentry work, accompanied by Tito. While organizing the wood, Tito warns Broker not to get involved with Gator, who has connections with Sheriff Keith, making it difficult to report him. Broker must remain cautious of Gator. Later, Maddie's birthday party is held with great joy. Maddie looks happy, surrounded by friends and teachers. Elsewhere, Cheryl is waiting for Albert's messenger, but she feels uneasy because Albert sent a crazy person, Cyrus Hanks, a high-ranking member of the Outcast gang known for his brutality. Soon, Cyrus arrives, demanding to know Broker's whereabouts. However, Cheryl refuses to tell him until Outcast agrees to work with her in the drug business. Cyrus is angered by this and shows no interest in Cheryl or Gator's business. He only wants to get to Broker. That night, Gator visits Cassie's house and tells her that the situation with Broker is over. He also warns Cassie to stay away from him because Broker is a former DEA agent. Cassie again asks for free drugs, but Gator refuses, telling her to stop using drugs to control her emotions. Meanwhile, Broker receives information about Gator from his former DEA colleague, Nichols, who tells him that Gator has ties to Albert's gang. Without wasting time, Broker heads to Gator and Cheryl's breakfast spot at Pak Kumis's Warteg. He warns Gator that if he dares to enter his house again, he will be finished. Broker then sneaks into Gator's factory to sabotage his drug business, planting gasoline in several light bulbs. If the lights are turned on, it will cause a massive fire. In the process, Broker finds Maddie's cat, but is ambushed by the thugs from the gas station. He fights them off, but is eventually caught and tortured. Despite the torture, Broker refuses to give up and defeats the thugs. He then plans to take Maddie and move out of town, but Maddie has grown attached to her school and doesn't want to leave. Meanwhile, Cyrus and his gang arrive at Gator's and Cheryl's place, preparing to capture Broker and get revenge on Albert. As night falls, Cyrus and his men head to Broker's house, guided by Cheryl. Broker is packing his things with Tito's help, preparing to leave. In short, Cyrus and his men arrived at Broker's house and scattered to every corner of the property, including the horse stable. From within the stable, Tito suddenly emerged and attacked one of the thugs. Although he was briefly overwhelmed, Tito eventually managed to eliminate the thug using a crowbar. Afterward, Tito signaled to Broker by honking the car horn. Unfortunately, he was shot by another of Cyrus's men. Upon hearing the horn, Broker quickly hid Maddie and instructed her to call the police. While waiting for the authorities, Broker decided to strike first. A fierce gun battle ensued. Meanwhile, Maddie, who had managed to escape from the thug, ended up running into Cheryl. As a result, Broker had to win the fight quickly to ensure his daughter's safety. In the end, Broker managed to incapacitate Cyrus. However, he was too late to catch up with Maddie, as Cheryl had kidnapped her and was taking her away on a speedboat. Not long after, Sheriff Keith arrived with his team, but unfortunately, they were too late, like the police in the Vrindavan movie. At the same time, Tito honked the horn again, but this time he was asking for help, as he was losing blood. While Tito was being treated by the medical team, Sheriff Keith suddenly received a call from Maddie, who had managed to take a phone with her. Maddie quickly informed them of her location. Without wasting any time, Broker immediately sped off. Meanwhile, Cheryl brought Maddie to Gator's factory. Gator was furious with Cheryl for bringing Maddie there. She should not have brought Maddie to that place, as Maddie was a witness to Cyrus's attack. However, Cheryl didn't want to hurt the child. She only intended to use her as bait. A while later, Cassie arrived with Jimmy. She had suspected that Gator was the one who kidnapped Maddie. By this point, Cassie had no issues with Broker's family. On the contrary, she wanted to help them. But when she turned on the factory lights, The factory caught fire and exploded. In the end, the trap set by Broker exploded, burning the entire factory. Gator, now panicked, decided to take Maddie with him, but Cassie stopped him, as she couldn't bear to see Maddie harmed. During their argument, Gator accidentally shot his sister in the stomach. Gator immediately felt guilty, but he still took Maddie with him. On the way, Broker saw Gator's car and immediately chased after it. However, he crashed on a bridge, flipping his car several times. Gator took advantage of the situation to finish off Broker. Luckily, Broker managed to get back on his feet and swiftly defeated Gator, knocking him out. Broker actually wanted to kill Gator, but he didn't want to do it in front of Maddie. As a result, he decided to hand him over to the police. Meanwhile, Cheryl had been apprehended by the sheriff's deputies, and Cassie was receiving medical attention. At the end of the film, Broker called the prison to speak with Albert. Broker told him that he couldn't wait to meet him. Albert, on the other hand, became nervous.